Going. Here we go. All right. Well, hey, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Milliken from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I've been looking forward to doing this program for quite a while now. Both of the guys that are with us today have written absolutely killer books. Eli Cranor, Don't Know Tough. He was kind enough to sign some for us, and we still have a few left. And then John Vercher, After the Lights Go Out. Wow. Welcome to the little show here, guys. It's an honor to have you both with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it's just we just do a sort of a casual conversation, have you guys talk to each other a little bit. Obviously both of your novels deal with high intensity athletics, and the price that sometimes becomes due in that world. Let's see here. Let me give you both a real formal intro. Let's see. Eli Cranor played quarterback at every level, Pee-wee to professional, and then coached high school football for 5 years. These days, he's traded in the pigskin for a laptop, writing from Arkansas, where he lives with his wife and kids. Eli's novel Don't Know Tough was awarded the Peter Lovesey First Crime Novel Contest. Congratulations. The New York Times called the novel one of the best debuts of 2022, while USA Today labeled it as one of the best books of the year. Along with fiction, Eli writes a nationally syndicated sports column, and his craft column, Shop Talk, appears regularly at Crime Reads. Eli is currently at work on his next novel, Ozark Dogs. Can't wait to hear about that, which will be published by Soho Crime in 2023. Let's see here, John. I might truncate yours a little bit if you don't mind, but let's see. John Vercher lives in the Philadelphia area with his wife and 2 sons. He holds a bachelor's in English from the University of Pittsburgh and an MFA in creative writing from the Mountain View Masters of Fine Arts program, and served as an adjunct faculty member at Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia. In 2022, he will serve as visiting faculty at Randolph College's low residency MFA program in Lynchburg, Virginia. John has written for Cognoscenti, the thoughts and opinions page of WBUR Boston. 2 of his essays published on race, identity, and parenting were picked up by NPR, and he has appeared on WBUR's Weekend Edition. Let's see, his nonfiction work has also appeared in Entropy Magazine, Crime Reads, and Booklist. John's debut novel, The 3/5, was named one of the best books of 2019 by the Chicago Tribune. And there's lots more of cool stuff, Acclaim. I won't go through all that, but gentlemen, really, really a treat to have you both with me today. I thought about, both of these books are difficult, tough reads. They both go really deep down inside. Can maybe have each one of you guys just kind of talk a little bit about the book, and then we'll do a deeper dig. Would that work? Just kind of an introduction to the book?
Sure. Eli, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah.
So Don't Know Tough. I finished this manuscript like back in 2017, and it was the 4th manuscript that I had finished when I wanted to try and start off and be a novelist. And I was about 1.5 years out from being a head football coach in Arkansas. So I was 26 when I got that job, and it was a pretty big school, but I played a lot of football. Like in college, I played a season overseas in Sweden. And so I really got the job because of my playing career, and not because of my coaching career. And so when I got that job, I was 26. We went 1-19 in 2 seasons. And it was just, it was from a very high poverty rate. I think like the free and reduced lunch, like that's a number that always sticks out to me, like the free and reduced lunch. So that's kids who are eligible to get free and reduced lunches, like at our school. It was like over 95%. So that was a really high poverty area. And I, as a coach in this area, and I think it really anywhere, but especially here, like I always say, like it's almost like being a sheriff being a preacher, being the mayor, and then being like a father figure to all these kids. And it was just for me at 26, you know, I just had no clue what I was getting into. I was just coming in there to, you know, to think it was like all this playing I'd done. And so
Probably
that,
a social worker too, I would imagine.
yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, huge portions of that. So the book draws heavily on that experience, but then also just draws on, I'm born and raised in Arkansas. I was born in the Delta region of Arkansas, over there close to like Memphis. Was raised in more of what was called the Arkansas River Valley, which is in between like Little Rock and Fayetteville. And so, yeah, I had that voice. Billy's voice is what opens the book. And that I wrote that opening chapter when I was I was still a teacher, but I was on a lunch break and I had that voice. And so the book centers around Billy Lowe, who's a running back from a highly volatile home life. His coach, Trent Powers, who's an evangelical Christian coach who thinks he can save Billy. And then there's a murder that happens right there on the eve of the playoffs that really threatens to tear the whole thing apart.
How about you, John? Just a basic setup, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper.
You know, a little bit of background. I grew up in a house where combat sports and sports in general were just kind of part of the DNA of my house. Like I grew up, I'm going to show my age, but I'm from the Hagler, Leonard, Hearns, Duran era of boxing. And, you know, my dad had the videotapes of NFL's greatest quarterbacks, John Facenda narrating with that incredible voice, all that stuff. So, you know, I grew up around all that. And then, you know, I was like every other kid that rushed out to a Taekwondo studio after the Karate Kid came out, and found that was my sport. Like that was, you know, I played football, I played basketball, but martial arts had a particular appeal for me. And so I did that all through high school. You know, took a little break from it in college because I discovered drinking, and then you know, ended up back in martial arts as a young adult, or as an adult, because I'd gotten so badly out of shape. And that was when mixed martial arts was starting to come to prominence. And, you know, and I had always had an interest in jiu-jitsu from watching those early UFC tapes. And so I got involved in it, and that really got in my blood. To the point where I didn't want to just train, I wanted to compete. And so I did as an amateur in both kickboxing and MMA. You know, I always make the disclaimer though, I was a tourist. Like I wasn't like these guys, you know, I didn't have at stake the same things that these men and women that compete do. But so, you know, having a love for the sport, having a love for the discipline of it, but also having spent you know, more than a decade as a physical therapist, working in sports medicine, working in skilled nursing, knowing the other side of the equation, I decided, you know, I hadn't read a book about that. I hadn't read the book about the cost that these athletes pay. And so, you know, as Toni Morrison says, if there's a book you haven't read, you must write it. And so that's exactly what I did. And so After the Lights Go Out is about an aging mixed martial arts fighter. He's mixed race. Black and white. He is suffering from CTE, which is pugilistic dementia, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And he's also caring for his white father, who's in late stages of Alzheimer's. And as those filters start to fall away from his father's mind, he gains some insight as to why his Black mother left when he was a child. So that's the basic setup. There's obviously more to it, but we can dive deeper as we go along.
Right. You know, he's really, I was going to ask you a little bit more about the CTE. And, you know, I mean, we see your character Scarecrow, you know, Xavier, you know, really at war with his own, running a race against the clock with his own mind. And some of those details, as I say, wow, that's some really amazing writing. Was this character kind of based upon a composite of people that you witnessed that had been going through similar things?
Yeah, I mean, both from a distance at the professional level, you know, watching stories about not just MMA fighters, but boxers and football players as well. And then just being immersed in the environment, even though I was only as an amateur, I was around people that were either pros or aspiring to that. And you hear the stories, you hear not just about the aches and pains, but about the headaches and the forgetfulness and the things that start to add up. So yeah, it was certainly not about any one person, but definitely a composite of experiences I had.
Right. And there's also, unless I'm misreading it, I don't think I am, but there's definitely an indictment of the often third world state of healthcare in this country. Absolutely incredible to read about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like since I came from that world, I get to say what I get to say that about it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still licensed. My wife still works in this field, and it's there's a reason I don't practice anymore. I mean, I still have my license, but it became harder and harder to provide the quality care that patients needed, simply because you're hamstrung by the logistics of the system.
Right. And some of the other characters in the book, there's a wonderful character, one of my favorites, named Shot, who's kind of a mentor, bad example, father figure, all these different things sort of rolled into one. Where does he come from?
Well, I mean, you can't write any kind of boxing or fighting novel without having the trainer that is almost as popular, if not more popular, than the protagonist. But the main reason he exists in the book is because I felt like Xavier needed a truth teller. He needed somebody who was going to give him the straight dope, whether he wanted to hear it or not, or whether or not it was the right time. Because Xavier's in denial about a lot of things. Some things about Shot, some things about his family, and some things about himself. And so without somebody to really put him in his place sometimes, the story would have been much shorter and taken a different path, I think.
Right. Now, Eli, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of these characters. I mean, Billy Lowe, he's one of these athletes who's naturally talented, but as you say, he's damaged in a way. He's volatile. He has a difficult time controlling his violence. Can you dig a little bit deeper about, did you observe kids like this when you were coaching, or people that come from similar backgrounds?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was never damaged like that. I had a great, very solid childhood, but I started playing tackle football when I was in third grade. And I have a picture, it's in my office. And my dad, when you're playing that pee-wee football, they put a piece of tape across your helmet and they write their name, so because the coaches, you all just look like a bunch of bobbleheads out there. And my dad wrote, instead of my name, instead of Cranor, he wrote Mad Dog, all one word, in all caps. And it was just this deal, and masculinity and everything about, and I didn't even play quarterback till I got to school age. I was a bigger kid. So I played D end, and it was all just about hitting people, and hitting people hard. So when I got in to be a coach and got to see, some of this real pain and stuff that I mean, it was always there when I was a player, but you didn't have to come face to face with it, like you did when you were a coach and you took these kids home and you saw the trailers and you saw the bed sheets, that separated one room from the next. And so that's where that really came from for me. I mean, there was a conglomeration of different kids, that all had stories so similar to Billy's, and that I drew from, trying to figure out, who this character for this novel would be. But yeah, there's this idea, that in football, same in MMA, that what you do in the octagon or what you do on a football field, it would get you arrested, anywhere else in America. And yet, you have this one little green light. And so when you play it out in or in a high school, you have these boys who are just full of this stuff, and then that was where that came from.
Right. And, you're part of the world. It reminds me a little bit of one of my favorite writers, who's Daniel Woodrell. Do you know his work?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do. I'm a big Woodrell fan. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of the best. Um, yeah. It seems like I don't know if you guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about sports or athletics as depicted in crime fiction, which there really isn't a whole lot. There's a little bit here and there, but certainly it's all over, other forms of entertainment, movies and television. And I just wanted to kind of pick your guys' brain about where they get it wrong from your perspective, how it's over dramatized. And there are a couple examples that I think, which I'm not an athlete, but of where they got it right, which was that wonderful movie, The Wrestler, with Mickey Rourke. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Absolutely.
I thought that was just a brilliant movie. And I was going to give a shout out to Soho in general. They're really kicking ass, and they've got, of course, you guys, but one of my dear friends and favorite writers, Gary Phillips, and he wrote what I think the quintessential sports noir, football noir, which was The Juke. And if you guys haven't read it, you need to pick up a copy. It's something else. I tried. It's funny. I tried to get Gary at the last minute yesterday. I emailed him. I tried to get him to surprise guest on this program, but yeah. What do you guys think about sports in literature and how they get it wrong, or do they get it right sometimes?
I guess I'll go first since Mad Dog went on mute. And of course now my dog is barking in the background and I'm unmuted. But yeah, not specific to crime literature, but just literature in general. I mean, the fight novel has been woefully underserved in the Black and other marginalized communities. Like there's an essay that I wrote that we're trying to get it placed, that talks about the origins of sort of the Great White Hope narrative that dominates fighting and boxing movies and books. It's it actually started oddly enough back with Jack London, the Call of the Wild writer, and his pretty much absolute hatred for Jack Johnson, the heavyweight champion of the world at that time. To me, that's where it goes wrong. I mean, there's so many untold stories, both by authors and about fighters, whether fictional or nonfiction, that some of these fantastic fight stories that just aren't told. So in my opinion, that's where they got it wrong.
Yeah, for me, I mean, like, not so much in literature, but y'all tell me, I mean, like, there is a very rare, like, if you see, I mean, John, like, you get me on this, like a fighting movie, or for me, it's a football movie. And like when the actors are trying to portray the physical, like, actions of football, like that is so like visible, like that these people have no, like it always comes off, wrong. But I'll tell you one boxing movie or boxing book that I really liked was The Professional.
Hines?
Yeah, Hines. Yeah. I really liked that book. Football, I like the North Dallas 40 by Peter Gint, which was, he was a Cowboys wide receiver. It's got really kind of, to me, it always had like a noir vibe, but yeah, I mean, there's not many just football, like Grisham's written a couple of football novels. And I remember like when we were in high school and we were football players, like we would jump, after like bleachers. And he wrote one called Playing for Pizza that was like about playing overseas in Italy. But I mean, Friday Night Lights gets a lot of stuff right. It's not a novel, but it gets a lot of stuff right. But yeah, I mean, that the North Dallas 40 of all the random books to throw out there, that one really, it always hit for me. It really, it was a dude who was in the system, had been in the system. He was in the system, you know, in the Cowboys, so much farther than I ever made it. But he was writing about the system. And that was something that always stood out to me, was like, man, you know, this is a guy who's been eat up, you know, by the system. And that was what that whole book was about.
And Eli's right. The Professional is good. And you know, Fat City is a phenomenal boxing.
Oh my God, yeah.
But it's, again, they're told from the perspective of a white author, you know, even if they include, you know, characters of color. So it's just, I think that there's, you know, when I say they get it wrong, it's just, there's so many untold stories that aren't being given, that are being given short shrift. And to Eli's point about the physical part of portrayal of it, it's always, whether it's football, basketball, soccer, whatever, it's always too clean in movies, right? Like, it's never, you know, it's just so clearly choreographed. It just doesn't have that feel of realism, even though all the acting is phenomenal. But when they get to that part, it just doesn't ring true.
John, so this is another white dude movie, but I do like it. It's Warrior with Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
And that movie, man, like I've seen that movie a million times, you know, but how does it fit in this MMA stuff? I mean, how does it?
I mean, it's considered like the gold standard, I think, as far as MMA movies go. But when I watch it, like, especially the fight scenes, I mean, it's so clearly choreographed. I mean, you can see there's even segments that there's like, you can see the same series of combinations being carried out like a couple of times within the same fight. I mean, the story's phenomenal, the acting's phenomenal. I mean, it got nominated for a couple of Oscars. You know, but there's still some of those things that, like, you know how they say, you know, especially in writing, like, don't ever give them something that pulls them out of the narrative. Like, when I'm watching that and I see that, I'm kind of like, okay, all right. Like,
yeah, that's crazy, you know, because like for me, and I don't know anything about that stuff, like, you know, I don't see it, but it's the same way with football, you know, like you see these actions on a football field and they just don't look genuine, you know. Right. But there's that scene in that movie with the dad, and he's got the headphones on, he's listening to Moby Dick, you know, and the great white whale, you know, and it made me think I remember reading your novel and thinking back to that movie, like with the dad and that sort of stuff. Like I felt a little connection, you know, there to that.
Yeah. What else was I going to bring up? Well, Eli, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your coach, Trent Powers. I thought he's a really interesting character and not kind of unlike anybody I've really seen before. You know, he knows that the Denton Pirates, you know, he has his own kind of, he's working his own angle in a way. You know, he knows that the Pirates can't really win without Billy. But you know, he's got these issues of redemption, both of you guys are really playing with themes of redemption in your books. But Trent, you know, he's a born again Christian. He has his own sort of the demons of his own background, you know, his own you know, background in foster care. Really interesting character. Can you talk about him a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So as a coach, you've got this weird paradox because you're paid to win football games. And if you don't win football games, then you literally can still lose your job. Like even at the high school level where I'm from, like if you go a certain number of years, it's just like college, you know, like these college coaches get like 1 year, you know, and if they're not winning, they're out. But at the same time, you're also just what we were talking about earlier, like social work, you know, mentor, you know, grades, all this stuff that really matters. And so by the nature of the job, like your professional job, like you are pulled in two directions. And I felt that really heavily. You know, I'd been a winner. I'd been a winner as I played. Before I got that job, I'd only been the coach for 2 years. And we went like 23-1, you know, in my 2 years previous to this job. And so, yeah, like the pool of kind of like capitalism, America, you know, like you're going to win and win at all costs. But at the same time, Like you see these kids and you see what's happening with them and what's really going on in their life. And then this is something too that really went into Trent's character that was something I struggled with as a coach was, you know, the ones that have talent that can really play, do they get more of your time? Like, are you trying to get them right mentally, you know, and right, you know, socially or whatever it needs so that they can perform on the field? Or are you really trying to help out the kid that's really got the worst problems? You know, it was a whirlwind, man. Like I said, I only made it 2 years and that was it, you know, if I hadn't been subjected to that buzzsaw at such an early age, you know, I don't know if I'd ever quit coaching. But it's like once I got to be the boss, I just had to jump out. You know, I had to get out, and thankfully so, because I don't know that I would ever have gotten all the way out and then, you know, started trying to write about it.
Yeah, I imagine that's quite a bit different, you know, different than you know, coaching adults, you know, who are like college level. People have already come through, and you know, yeah, amazing. Let's see here. I wanted to talk about, John, a little bit about one of my favorite characters in your book, Loki. What a wonderful, I love the dog. And, you know, of course, the poor dog goes through some stuff in the book, but, and man, let's talk about him.
Oh, man.
And the role he plays in this book, which is considerable in my opinion.
Yeah. It's well, I'm glad you asked it the way you did. I think I got my first dog-related review not too long ago.
You can't fuck with dogs, man.
Well, I mean, I didn't kill the dog, like no spoiler alert, but I mean, the dog makes it. But like my question was, and it was pretty funny from the reviewer too, because they called themselves out on their own hypocrisy about, like, you know, I probably should be more concerned for the main character and not the dog, which was like, yeah, you know, kind of, but you know, but they're both fictional. So, but yeah, the dog was, you know, I knew I was taking a risk with how the dog is introduced in the beginning, but to me, it was important to establish very early on just how bad off Xavier was at this point. And then to have the dog persist with him was really sort of an allegory for Xavier's life as a fighter, you know, because Loki was a rescued fighting dog that was had become sort of a mascot for the rescue because nobody wanted him. Nobody wanted, you know, a quote unquote damaged animal. And so he, you know, Xavier takes him in because he doesn't frankly want to be alone in his struggle. And he feels a kinship to the dog, whether he knows that's why it is or not. So yeah, it was, you know, and I'm a dog lover. So it was that was, you know, I've got two myself, and that was the real reason for wanting to include him in that narrative, is because dogs do have that ability to sort of make you feel not so alone.
They're just unconditional love machines, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we had my wife and I had she's passed away, but a greyhound, and she had raced in Tijuana in her career, and she had so many battle scars, you know, just like torn ear, and her tongue was split, all these wounds, and she was the most gentle, chill dog, you know. Not much of a guard dog though. would not bark, but
well, and those racing dogs are frequently having to be rescued, right? I mean, like it's one of the largest population of rescued dogs, I think.
Well, a lot of the tracks around the country are closing now, which is, you know, probably good.
Yeah.
And you learn just the, you know, the shitty lives that a lot of them have.
Yeah.
You know, living in a crate, you know, 23 hours a day, and but even, it's funny, not to digress on my dog, but you know, it was like, even in her retirement, you know, she was just like the biggest couch potato most of the time, but then it was showtime in the backyard, hauling ass. A wonderful dog.
Oh man.
Yeah, John, I wanted to get a little bit more into what I, you know, the part of the book that, maybe Eli, you'll jump in too, about Xavier's relationship with his father. Very beautifully done, I thought anyway, and very complicated relationship. You have these issues of duty to family versus, perhaps willfully not seeing a side of your father. And as you said earlier, this isn't really giving away spoilers, I don't think, in this kind of a novel. It's Alzheimer's that he has, or is it last stage dementia?
Alzheimer's dementia, yeah.
Yeah, but he's had to be put into a home, and Xavier's really had to take the lead on arranging all of this. And there's some very poignant scenes, where his dad's like, okay, well, is this the day we're going to go home? Are you taking me home now? But then, as you say, as the filters go away, some ugly parts of him come out. And often in these kind of situations, it's inappropriate sexual stuff that can come out in these places. So talk a little bit about the father. And he's a very important part of this book.
Yeah, I mean, and Eli and I talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it in the interview, but we talked about it just in general. It's sadly that his condition and the way he behaves is pretty true to life. I was lucky enough to talk to David Joy about this too. And one of the statistics we talked about is that about 80% of the people that staff nursing homes are Black women. And, when they're working with these older white men and white women who have grown up in an era where they could say whatever they want and did whatever they wanted. And, especially when those filters come off, they say some awful racist stuff to these people who are trying to maintain their dignity. And so, while trying to rob them of their own. So but that story, I think, goes largely untold. And so to me, I couldn't write a novel that dealt with issues of mental health and dementia without also bringing that story to light and giving due praise to the men and women that work in those situations. I also told that story because I was writing this, in the midst of all the tumult of the last two elections. And, a lot of people started to find out that their friends thought things that they didn't think they thought.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people that had a hard time letting go of people they considered their loved ones, but couldn't reconcile the fact that they harbored these terrible thoughts and ideals. And so, for Xavier, a mixed race man who presents Black, to discover that his father had some pretty awful latent racism, it still wasn't easy for him to just turn that switch off and say, I'm cutting you off, you're out of my life, because the man also cared for him and raised him. I mean, it's the unfortunate reality is it's usually complicated like that. It's not usually so easily defined.
Right.
So I wanted to present a story of that nature.
Right. And boy, you sure are right. I mean, it's like suddenly it's people in Washington are giving you the okay to express these these kind of opinions and thoughts that we thought perhaps naively that we'd moved past more than we had.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I'd like to ask you guys both about, because both the books deal with mentor figures in different ways. Talk about how you both got started writing and maybe some teachers and mentors that helped you out along the way.
Mad Dog? You're never living that nickname down, by the way.
Yeah,
I will constantly refer to you as Mad Dog.
I'll put it out there, man. Mad Dog. I need to get some tape and just some magic marker. No, man. So I started writing seriously my senior year of college. I was playing quarterback. I was an English literature major, which was a strange combination. And it was a tiny school, private school in Arkansas, Southwest Arkansas. And there were literally six English lit seniors majors that year. And I was the only dude. And I happened to also be the quarterback, of the team. But I took an advanced creative writing fiction class with a dude named Johnny Wink. And Johnny Wink is entering like his 58th year of teaching now at Ouachita. Like he's still there and still going, and he's in his late 70s. And he was a game changer. I thought I wanted to do like law. That's why I was doing English. I always been a reader from early on. But he changed it. And so like the whole course, you were supposed to write like 2,000 word short story. And it was the fall of my last season there. And I'd write a short story every week. And like on Friday, I'd slide it under his door to his office, like late Friday afternoon, like after our final walkthrough practice. And then Saturday, we'd play the games, and then Sunday, and then Monday would come around and he'd have the story, all marked up for me. And it was this, real cool back and forth with a dude who, was willing to read. It was a one-man audience at a time when I needed it most. From there, I went on to play in Sweden that one season. Still was writing because it was really a low-key, deal. But when I became a football coach for 5 years, I really put it aside. And when I got out of coaching, coaching and football had taken such a huge part of my life that I just, I needed something to do. Like I needed to go, to have a goal or something to work toward. And so I just started writing, trying to hit a word count a day, or trying to do and submit short stories, to places. And so, yeah, Johnny Wink, I still call Johnny Wink every Tuesday night. And whatever I'm working on that week, I read him, a portion of it. He'll really let me go, about as long as I need to go. If I'm really struggling with the scene or whatever, he'll still let me read it out to him. And he's still going, man. He's got planning to start again next fall, I can't tell you exactly what number it is, but he's 77. So, I mean, he's been teaching for a hot minute, and I don't think he'll ever stop.
Wow. How about you, John?
I got a few, honestly. I'll try to keep it brief, but I would say it probably started in high school with one of my English teachers, Jerry Rosenthal, who since passed away. But I was like a movie and TV and books obsessed kid, like I always have been. And I felt like he was the one teacher at that level that really saw something in that love for that. Saw that I had a love for story, and really encouraged that. And then when I got to college, I ended up deciding to major in writing, although I was still pretty sure I was going to go into healthcare because I didn't see a career in writing. Like I didn't have anybody really advising me in that way. But so I majored in English and majored in creative writing because I loved it from high school. And I had probably one of the most amazing professors in my intro to poetry, Jan Beatty. She's still a big poet in Pittsburgh. She doesn't teach at Pitt anymore, but I think she's at Chatham, maybe. Just amazing. Really kind of took me under her wing, took me to see other poets. Just really made me feel like I was maybe kind of all right at this stuff. And I also had a great professor of critical reading that was really influential in how I write and what I like to read. He used to do this thing where when he would give us a topic, whenever we were to write on the topic, we were never allowed, it had to be single spaced, no margins, could not be longer than a page, but could not be shorter than a page. Every assignment had to be that way. So he really taught us about, economy of phrasing, but also how to make sure we said enough of what we had to say. It was a great class. He is actually, sadly, also too, passed away way before his time. And then I got to give shout out to my friend and fellow author, Ted Flanagan. We met in the same MFA program. And it was like we had known each other our entire lives, and we've been fast friends ever since. We exchange pages all the time.
Is he the guy that wrote that killer book set in Worcester, Mass?
Yes, Every Hidden Thing.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a phenomenal book. He's a fantastic writer. I don't think there's a book the guy hasn't read. But he really, we're peers, but he is a mentor to me in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't think there's a day goes by that we're not texting, either bullshitting about something or talking about writing, mostly talking about writing. Yeah, he's I couldn't talk about mentors without talking about Ted.
Well, you started to mention, which is where I was going to go next, of course, which is favorite writers and people that inspire you, writers that you go back to. Sounds like both of you read really widely.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, John, who are some of your favorites? Who do you draw inspiration from?
So I got to say, probably, at least currently, because it's sort of a changing rotation, but Matt Johnson and Jesmyn Ward are probably like my two all-time just go-tos. Matt Johnson's got a new book out now. It's as hysterical as you would expect it to be, but also as witty and as insightful. I was really fortunate at this Randolph MFA that I went to be around some incredible poets. I've only kind of flirted with poetry other than when I was in school. And some of this, some of the stuff that I was surrounded by at this program, some of the level and the quality of the poets there have blown my mind. Talking about Dinez Smith, Shayla Sabri, Anthony Cody. I mean, they're just, I could go on. Without taking up too much time, that's just some off the top of my head. But that was amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Eli?
Yeah, when I was doing all that Johnny Wink stuff, I came across this Mississippi author by the name of Larry Brown. And Larry Brown was a fireman, didn't have a college education, and just took after it like a workman-like attitude. I think it was like 7 years, before he ever broke into publishing. So there was a documentary called The Rough South of Larry Brown, and we watched that with Johnny Wink. I watched in my little apartment. And so that was when I think I was starting to really want to write. I was reading Larry Brown and following his story, to see about writing. But before that, it was a lot of the classics. I mean, starting with like Flannery O'Connor, Toni Morrison, Hemingway, Faulkner. It was a lot of that stuff. These days, some of the best stuff that I've read, John's book is right up there, and 5 Decembers by James Kestrel was great in a recent read. And then Dwyer Murphy has got An Honest Living, which comes from the movie Chinatown. It's a cool play on that. I got an early look at that a couple of weeks back.
I get to talk to him next week. That should be fun.
Yeah. Have you read it?
I've just started it. It seems like a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, line by line.
Chandler style.
Yeah, well, that was somebody I didn't say. I've read all 42 Elmore Leonard novels, Westerns, everything. I just got stuck on him a couple of years back. And Dwyer's book really reminded me of Dutch's way with language and on just a line level.
Did you ever get a chance to meet him?
No, I didn't. Ace has given me like the first person account, of there's something when they're in France and Ace is there and Elmore Leonard's there, and he says something to Ace like before he lights a cigarette up. He says, watch this, and like right when he lights a cigarette up, all the people start taking pictures, and that's what he was preparing Ace for. So it was right when he lights one up or something. But no, he was gone before I ever got into anything.
Yeah, he's an a great person to have as an inspiration too.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What was I was gonna say something, because something occurred to me about sports, kind of forgotten sports. Have you guys ever read a boxing novel by Jim Tully called The Bruiser? Came out in I think the 30s or 40s.
No.
Yeah, Tully was a really interesting character during the Depression gangster era. He wrote, a book called Shanty Irish, which is really good. And he wrote one of the great hobo memoirs called Beggars of Life. So if you're looking for obscure and interesting writers, I always collect them. He's worth checking out. And also there was, John, you're talking about how, a lot of voices have been kept out of the narrative. There's a good one by a guy named Floyd Salas, Salas, called Buffalo Nickel, which deals, if I'm not mistaken, with biting or with biting. Yeah, but you're right. By and large, and the whole era of Jack Nichols or Jack. God, I must be getting tired. Jack London as a as a sports writer.
Yeah.
And James Carlos Blake wrote an interesting book called The Killings of Stanley Ketchel, which is all set in that era of boxing. Really, really neat historical novel.
There's a terrific nonfiction essay collection as the Cambridge Companion to Boxing, and they really take a deep dive into that era of literature and the dearth of writers of color in that era. So that might be something interesting for you to check out as well.
Definitely. Have you read much? Actually, either of you, have you read much Chester Himes?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's one of
my shelf back there. Yeah,
all-time favorites.
Yeah,
The Primitive and some of those wonderful novels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so many good writers out there. Let's see. What about what's next for both of you? What do you got on tap?
I'm working on book 3. Might have some news about that shortly. So in that case, I'm going to be kind of coy about it and not say anything yet. But yeah, something coming up soon.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Right on. Does it have to do with Hollywood by chance?
With the book or the project?
the news that.
Oh no, nothing along those lines yet. Conversations, I guess, but nothing concrete to talk about. But
gotcha.
Yeah, but no, working hard on the 3rd book.
Awesome.
Yeah, book 2 comes out in April 4th from Soho. It's called Ozark Dogs.
Fast.
So yeah, and I had when like Don't Know Tough won the Peter Lovesey contest, I had like 8 manuscripts finished. So that's been the weirdest thing about this whole thing, was trying to figure out what to some of them need to be burnt and deleted and never shown to the world, but there are some that need to be out there, and this is a good follow-up. In my hometown back in 2017, there was a murder in a junkyard, and in that deal, like, these 2 boys kept coming by and stealing like stereos and hubcaps, petty theft. So the guy who owned the junkyard couldn't, he called the cops, they couldn't ever catch him. So one night he put a bunch of hubcaps and stereo parts out in the middle of his junkyard and got up in a deer stand, got an AR-15 and shot both of them in the back.
And
it split our town in half, because half the town was like, yeah, you're stealing from me, you're on my property. Like, they had no idea about stand your ground laws, and Arkansas is not a stand your ground state. They had nothing. And then the other half was like, man, he just committed murder. Well, he got convicted of 2 life sentences without parole. It's been appealed a bunch of times. He was a pretty prominent member of our town. And anyway, this book is loosely inspired by that. It's called Ozark Dogs.
That comes out this time next year, or
April 4th, 2023.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah, that sounds outstanding.
Yeah. I'm just trying to see if there's any questions coming in from our audience here. Are there any, we talked a little bit at the beginning, are there any questions that you guys have been dying to ask each other that you haven't had a chance to?
I don't know. We already talk, so it's kind of
So yeah, besides just the bald head and the beard, John and I also have the same publisher and the same agent. David Hale Smith. So we're right in the same camp. So
yeah, and Ted is with
Ted recently
with David as well. Yeah,
yeah, man,
snatching us all up.
David.
Shout out to DHS and
Yeah.
Gary
and Gary. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to meet Gary a couple of months back in Dallas. There was so y'all were
that Noir Fest.
Yeah. So y'all throughout the noir term. So this is how ignorant I am. When my book came out, like they started saying, like, this is Southern noir. My dad texts me like when he reads one of the reviews, and he's like, son, what's noir? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I have no idea what this is. So David invites me to come to this film thing, and he wants me to introduce these movies that I've never seen, like these old noir films. And as I'm watching them, I have to tell this story. I have to say, like, up until a couple of months ago, I had no idea what noir was, but I'm starting to think it's just a tragedy, in the worst form possible, So that's me being gut level honest. Yeah. Cause I loved Coen brother films, I loved the dark stuff always, but I would have never had a definition for it,
I'm right there with you, man. Like when 3/5 came out, like, everybody was saying it was a crime novel. And I was like, I didn't know I wrote a crime novel. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I've always been kind of genre agnostic. So it's like, I just like good stories and good characters.
And After the Lights Go Out, it's not Soho crime.
Right.
Oh, isn't it?
No.
I'll be dog. I didn't know that. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah.
But back to Gary is the man. Like, I could have literally
coolest.
Yeah, like my wife went on the trip with me, and she was like having to like pull me, from Gary every night, because I was just like, no, I just need to stay here and soak this up.
What's funny is that if you go to, I've known Gary for a long time, and if you go to a conference or something, or a bar at a hotel at a conference, you can be assured that Gary is holding court in the middle of the room, and just everybody's kind of just circling around him.
Yeah.
But he's just such a charismatic and just such a cool guy. Yeah, really like him. He's the best.
Yeah.
And a killer writer too, Yeah. Yeah. So let's see, anything else coming in? I think that's good. Well, gentlemen, it's been a real treat to have you for this hour. Would love to have you out here in person, in the desert. Maybe when your next books come out, that would be awesome. Consider it an open invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for everybody watching, here are the two books we've been talking about. And I realize we've been meandering all over the place, but that's just my way. But seriously, congratulations, you guys. Really, really pleased for your success. And thanks again.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Eli, always good to see you.
John, good to see you, man. Next time.
Thanks again, everybody, for watching.
Going to VoucherCon?
I am tentative. I'm booked. But
Yeah, with everything. Yeah.
People are acting the fool on airplanes with no masks.
Yeah.
So
where is VoucherCon this year?
Minnesota, I think. Yeah. Minneapolis.
You gonna go, Eli?
I don't know. I'm in that same boat with John. We've got the flights, but I don't know if I don't know. We'll see what happens with everything.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Have a great night.